Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, and I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks. And joining me just about every single episode is my I don't know, I try to come up with a new adjective every time. This is my co-host, Brian Smith, except you're that way.
Hey Eric, how's it going today?
It's been a weird day. I've been in release land. We usually release a new version of RHEL in around mid to late Q2, and we're gearing up for that, gearing up for summits. So a lot going on right now, and I'm just glad to take away from the slide decks and the conference prep to chat a little RHEL and hang out with our amazing audience.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a really awesome guest to talk to today, all about RHEL subscriptions. It's going to be an awesome show.
Yep, you all know him, or most of you should. Anyway, he's been on the show a couple of times. He is Mr. Rich Dorito. He is not the czar of subscriptions. What is your nickname around these parts?
Oh, I mean, I have many, but I will go with I'm the team lead of the hybrid cloud subscription experience group at Red Hat, and we're responsible for the subscription experience for all of Red Hat's platforms. Internally, people call us the Skewtang clan. That just happens to work well for us. Obviously, I can't put that in any public literature, but our job is to make the customer subscription experience, sane and clean.
But you do have like a jacket patch or something. I've seen those around conferences.
Yes, we do. We do have some unofficial swag. It doesn't have the Red Hat brand on it for obvious reasons. But many of our customers and members of the sales force who help us out on a lot of stuff, we give them a Skewtang clan patch as commemoration of the hard work they do in helping us out.
Well, we are going to definitely talk about all the hard work that you and your team have been doing over the last couple of years. The subscription process, the system management has changed so much. It's gotten so much easier. But we'll dive into that. But first, for those of our audience who don't know you, why don't you give us a quick introduction? You told us a little bit about what you do, but what about Rich?
All right. So I'll give the quick Red Hat history, and then I'll give the fun outside of Red Hat history. So I've been Rich Dorito. I'm based in Florida, used to be based in Pennsylvania, but I moved. Been with Red Hat for almost 14 years at this point. So yeah, I've been around for a while. Did a number of roles. I came on board as a solutions architect on the pre-sale side. Heard the calling of the business unit. So I came over to the business unit side as a technical marketing manager for Red Hat Satellite for a few years. Transitioned to product management for Red Hat Satellite. And then in around 2018, the powers that be at Red Hat were like, hey, we need a dedicated team to improve the customer subscription experience. So they pulled me off of Satellite. They pulled in a couple other folks, like my teammate Dan and a few other folks. And we've built a team to go build clean and sane subscription management solutions for our customers and partners. Outside of Red Hat, I got a lot of fun but weird hobbies. One of them is restoring antique cast iron. That's my jam. You give me a rusty pan, I'll turn it into something amazing. I like to cook. I like to barbecue. I like to lift weights. Try to stay healthy and enjoy, the warm weather here in Florida when it's usually, really hot, but not too hot today.
Well, that's awesome. So let's start with just a high level, like what is a Red Hat subscription?
All right. So the best way we like to think about a Red Hat subscription, and I think folks, can use different definitions, but the one that we like to use, because I think it's simple and clean, is a Red Hat subscription gives you access to software services and support governed by a business model and time, right? So that's really it, right? When you get a Red Hat subscription, it is access to our software services and support. It's governed by how long it's good for. There's a lot of business model aspects that go into it, like how much of it do you count, or do you prepay for it, or do you post-pay for it? But that's really it.
And you mentioned, back in 2018 is when your team was kind of formed, and things have, pretty significantly changed, since 2018. So can you talk a little bit about what's kind of the old subscription experience, and how has that changed over time, and what is new and what's improved at this point?
Yeah. So the way I would think about it is the Red Hat subscription experience of old was very monolithic, right? We had a singular set of tools that tried to solve the needs of multiple personas, right? I'll use Subscription Manager here as a great example. In order for you to use Red Hat technology, you had to use Subscription Manager, which, okay, it's a tool, whatever. But you had to know a lot about subscriptions. What subscription pool do I attach to? Is it the right one? Does this subscription pool provide access to the bits that I care about? And we jokingly call that having the PhD in subscriptions, right? And it's, if you're an operator of technology, you shouldn't need to know that, but you had to, because the stack was monolithic. And that's how the old experience was. We were trying to do procurement things like count usage and help people understand how much of the software they're using in the same tool that we're trying to do, give people access to a repo so they can build a web server. So what we decided to do was, we were like, wait a minute, those are two separate personas. We should maybe build tools that are purpose built for those personas. If you're a technologist, let's deal with you in technology terms. But if you're a procurement officer or a person who cares about, usage and transacting with Red Hat, we got to build you tools too. So that's what we've basically been doing for the past, 4 to 5 years, while also honoring the fact that, like, all the tools we previously built still have to work, right? So we've been transitioning folks over into, new experiences that are purpose built for their persona. Technologists can focus on technology, buying personas can focus on buying, and we stitch them together only as closely enough to make it work. So that's really the major change, right? You'll see a lot of the same components, like Subscription Manager still exists, but it behaves very differently than it did in the past.
So as you said, this work's been going on since about 2018, and we've seen over the past few years, in particular, pieces of that monolith being stripped away, re-engineered, and redeployed. So what's the end state look like? What for a lot of our systems administrators in the audience, our developers who may not deal with system management all that often, what's kind of the end goal?
So for the operation side, for people who touch technology, we're basically already there, right? For you, it's like, hey, I can use Red Hat stuff and it's super easy. And we're going to show some of that today, right? We're going to show you, like, just register a system and install software. That's all you do. All the real complexity is hidden from you. Same thing with containers, right? If you want to deploy your Red Hat container, just deploy the container. It has access to updates. We got it taken care of for you out of the box. So honestly, for the development personas and the operations personas and people who touch technology, we're there. Where we need to get to is really a lot of the technology to make it easier for buying personas and procurement personas and people who touch the money to really have that inside of tools that they care about, right? So my end state is, I'll use an example. If you are a large multinational company, you should be able to go to a Red Hat console and be able to see your usage of Red Hat products across your fleet, right? And be able to drill down into that on a per department or per business unit level, however you're organized internally, and be able to understand, how much that usage contributes to your cost or whatever you're doing with Red Hat. Those are all separate things that are integrated with the people who use technology, but it doesn't necessarily block them from using the technology. And that's really kind of the major changes that we've made and where we really want to go. So my end state is very simple. If you're using Red Hat technology, I don't really care where you're using it at. I want to be able to report on it and give you visibility to how much of it you're using so that you can understand, do you need to pay Red Hat money? Do you not need to pay Red Hat money, right? It can go either way. And that's really our end state, right? Is to provide that global level of visibility, excuse me, with, specificity for folks who need to drill down into it, while also keeping it dirt simple for people to use the tech.
So we might have some people watching who, don't have any Red Hat subscriptions, right now currently. Maybe they're just investigating Red Hat, want to do some developer type stuff with Red Hat. Can you talk a little bit about, what exactly is the Red Hat developer subscription for individuals, and how can people get access to that?
Yeah, so the developer for individual subscriptions available at developers.redhat.com. It's intended for development use and small production use. And there's generally just go sign up for it, accept the terms, and it provides access to, I believe, 16 systems worth of Red Hat technology, so you can go ahead and use it and get started. Some major improvements that were made, not by my team directly, but by the developers team. They made some significant improvements to the renewal process for the developer subscription, which is actually really good because it intersects with work that our team does. Specifically, they made it so that you can renew your developer subscriptions in advance of them expiring, which is great. And that ties into the work that we do on our side through simple content access. So once you renew your subscription on the developer side, it just keeps working, right? Which is the way it's supposed to work, but it did not work that way in the past. So the combination of their improved renewal experience and the improvements we did on the subscription experience, those two things together make it super easy for folks who need to or want to use RHEL in a low cost, or in this case no cost scenario. You can go ahead and do it very simply with very little friction.
Love that. Yeah. So I know back in the early days of me being a systems administrator, Red Hat didn't have a program like this, at least not like what it is now. And so I had to lean on downstream clones that really were almost there, and it could most of the time fill my needs. But this program is amazing. I pitch this all the time. It's in our show notes and every video and live stream we do, just because the ability to get in, use RHEL technologies, get your hands on Red Hat Insights, get a number of virtual or physical systems up and running, and actually be using the real bits is just absolutely you can't beat that experience. In fact, it's kind of funny that I go to other technologies to try and run RHEL on top of them, and it's like, where's your developer subscription? I'm trying to learn how to run my product on top of yours. Why don't I? That's not fair.
Yeah, it is one of our most popular offerings. I was doing some research internally, and like a super majority of Red Hat accounts have a developer subscription. It is widely used because it is simple to acquire, provides a decent portion of the portfolio, and when you're trying to validate a technology or learn a technology, it's a powerful tool in the toolkit.
So, Rich, earlier you kind of touched on some of the improvements that were made, but can you talk more about like simple content access? What exactly is that?
Yeah. So, and a little bit of this requires you to know a little bit of kind of like where Red Hat's experience was before. But simple content is it's a set of technologies that is built into our hosted portals, as well as into Red Hat Satellite, that makes it super easy for folks to use Red Hat technology. So for instance, in the past, if you purchased different types of Red Hat subscriptions, you as a person using RHEL would need to know which of those subscriptions you needed to associate with that system to unlock a specific repository. So a good example here, you have a RHEL system, you're like, I want to put Pacemaker on that system because I need to run a highly available cluster. Okay, which of these 10 subscriptions provides Pacemaker? I don't know, right? You kind of have to figure it out, and you learn this domain knowledge over time, which if you've been around for a while, you probably know it. But if you're new to RHEL, it's confusing, right? So what simple content does at its core is basically says, outside of you just purchasing the correct subscription, you have access to the bits, right? So all I need to do is follow the RHEL docs. If my procurement guy tells me we purchased the RHEL subscription that provides high availability, then all I need to do is go over to the Red Hat docs, register the system as per the Red Hat docs, enable the HA repository as per the Red Hat docs, and install Pacemaker. I don't have to worry about what subscription I need to attach, or what happens if, this particular subscription expires, but I still have other valid ones over there. Like, it's just a level of complexity that the average technologist does not need to worry about. And honestly, the average procurement person doesn't really need to worry about either, right? Most organizations are like, hey, I need to know if what I am using is below or above, what I contracted, with you to use. And all of that attaching subscription stuff didn't really answer that question. So we're like, if that's the case, then why even do it? And SCA, which is Simple Content Access, shortened, that's when it makes go away.
Yeah, Simple Content Access has just really made things just so much easier if you're a system admin trying to manage all of this stuff. It's just a really, really cool technology. So with that said, I know there's some changes coming later this year in relation to Simple Content Access. Can you touch on what's going to be changing later this year?
Yeah, so Simple Content is part of a larger set of changes to our subscription experience that we are rolling out this year. Let me probably think the best way to put this. So today we currently have 2 disjointed RHEL management experiences, one that lives in access.redhat.com, and then the majority of which lives in console.redhat.com, right? And Red Hat has been centralizing on console.redhat.com as being its management platform of choice for all of its portfolio products, not just RHEL, but also OpenShift, Ansible, and some of the other partners in our portfolio. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to have a systems and subscription management experience on a completely different web property than the rest of console.redhat.com. So what we've been working on over the past, 2 to 3 years has been migrating that subscription experience and migrating even the systems over from access.redhat.com to console.redhat.com. And the first step in doing that is turning on Simple Content and making Simple Content available and mandatory for all customers who are using our hosted platforms and satellite as well. So the TLDR is when you turn on Simple Content Access, you're switching to a new subscription experience, a superior subscription experience that also migrates you from access.redhat.com to console.redhat.com. Right. So you'll still have all the stuff that you always had before, right? Your systems are still there. You still see your vulnerabilities. You still do, all of, see when your subscriptions expire, all that good stuff. But that's basically, what's happening this year. So, if you are not using Simple Content, later on this year, we will be transitioning customer accounts that aren't using Simple Content to using Simple Content. So read up on it if you haven't made that change yet. But it's pretty clean of a switch. And then simultaneously, all of the things that used to exist in access.redhat.com now exist in console.redhat.com. So like activation keys and your system lists and your manifest, if you're a connected satellite customer, all that stuff already exists in console.redhat.com. So there's a little bit of, moving the cheese per se, but it's better cheese, right? Like we're going from like Parmesan Reggiano to like Grana Padano, right? Like we're better cheese. But that's basically what's happening in the subscription space.
So I think the best way to really understand how useful things like Simple Content Access are is to actually see it in action. So do you want to show us like how do you register a RHEL system at this point?
Yeah, so I'll use Subscription Manager here. And I'm going to register with an activation key just because I'm not typing out my password live. Right, so you always have to register a system, right? Generally speaking, in order to get Red Hat bits, you got to register a system. But it happens pretty quick. That's done. And then off to the races we go, right? Just go ahead, yum install Podman. And then, go ahead, hit yes, and, download and install the packages. Or simultaneously, if you needed to, enable a different repo, you would do that with like the Subscription Manager repos command, and then enable a repo and then just go. There's no attaching the subscription. There's no pool IDs. It's super simple, right? So the easiest way to think about it is when SCA is turned on, unless you need a optional repository like Code Ready Builder, it's one command to register, and then you install the bits, right? So it's pretty straightforward. There's no, I have to figure out the right pool ID and attach the right pool ID and go through that madness. It's just register and run. I mean, that's SCA in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'll also point out, we worked last year on a new RHEL system role, the RHC system role, that can actually automate this process too. So if you have, if you're spinning up systems, you want to automate this process, we have the RHC system role that can automate that. So
yeah, and as I said in our last time I was on the show, you kept me absolutely honest in delivering that that system role. But yeah, if you're a Ansible fluent person, and you're familiar with RHEL system roles, there's an RHC role in there that handles getting you connected to the insight services if that's a thing you want to turn on. Handles a few other things, and I think in the near future we're even going to support that role on RHEL 7. So kind of in the spirit of system roles, having a single way to configure and interface with your systems, you'll have that for 9, 8, 7, and obviously for 10 whenever that comes out.
Well, I know I speak for most people watching this when I say that I'm so going to miss having to track down pool IDs or trying to come up with some clever way of scripting it. I mean, it's my heart
Nobody got
breaks.
time for that, bro. Like, yeah, I mean, like if we're gonna, allow me to make a future looking statement, right? One of the things that we are looking at is, as I mentioned before, later on this year, SCA is becoming mandatory, right? And that's important, not just because of all of the past experiences that we want to get rid of that, were complex and had friction. SCA is super important because so many of our new experiences are built on top of it, right? So I'm going to kind of nudge us into our next topic a little bit, because we started talking, want to talk about like extended lifecycle support and some of the RHEL add-ons. And at the top of the call, one of the things I had mentioned was, a Red Hat subscription is just access to services, software, and support governed by a business model. And when most people think of a RHEL subscription, we generally think of it as a prepaid annual subscription, right? Like you pay for it for a year, you have access to the stuff for a year. Well, that's great for many workloads, but for a lot of other things, that's not the right way to sell it, not the best business model. So as we think of things like the ELS add-on, we're making those available in cloud marketplaces as hourly subscriptions that you can post pay for. And imagine how complex hourly subscriptions would be if you have to then also add in the complexity of attaching subscriptions to systems. You know what I mean? And just becomes even more complex. So when you have this world of your customers can buy your products in multiple different ways, every single time you introduce a new way for them to buy your stuff, if that is, associated with also having to attach subscriptions for all that stuff, it just becomes increasingly more and more complex, right? So in order for Red Hat to deliver all the new things we want to deliver, like metered subscriptions, which are a thing that we are, working on, will be out very shortly. It becomes almost impossible to do those in a world where one has to attach entitlements to systems.
Yeah, this is a really good point. And for anyone watching, we have RHEL 7 coming up on its end of its normal 10-year life cycle here in June. So just a couple months away, it'll be at the end of its normal life cycle. And then, Rich mentioned that the ELS, the extended life cycle support subscription, where you can get an additional 4 years of support for RHEL 7. So this is going to be a really important topic for people, in the coming months, around the June timeframe when it makes that transition. So Rich, so for people who have RHEL 7 in the cloud, who are interested in the extended lifecycle subscription, after June, how do they get that in the cloud?
Yeah, so there's going to be multiple ways, right? And it kind of just really depends on which one makes sense for your use case, right? Again, when most folks think of traditional subscriptions from Red Hat, they think of prepaid annual subscriptions. And depending on your use case, that might be the best thing for you to buy for ELS if you require it, right? Because you're like, hey, I know the system is going to be around for a while. We're not going to have it migrated in a year. Maybe making a yearly prepaid purchase makes sense, right? But sometimes that doesn't, right? If you have a system where you're like, I don't need a full year of coverage. Maybe I only need 4 months because we got plans for decommissioning. They just won't finish by, June 30th is the date, right? Yeah, June 30th. I better know that date. So let's say you're in that scenario and you're like, I know I'm just going to need 4 months of coverage. Well, buying a yearly subscription might not be the best option for you. So what we've been building, my team, as well as, some of our other partner teams inside of Red Hat, like we've been building post-paid metered subscriptions for our Red Hat offerings. So you can go to, I'm going to use Amazon here, but the same would be true and the Azure Marketplace, and then a few others. You can go to the Amazon Marketplace. You can subscribe for RHEL ELS by the hour. We have a new metering stack that is introduced in RHEL that gets installed on the system, and it'll measure when you installed ELS, how big that system is, and we'll actually post that usage to Amazon or Azure if you're Azure Cloud, and it just shows up in your cloud bill just as another line item, just like you would pay for your hourly RHEL in the cloud or any other hourly product you would buy through Amazon. So one of the things that we've been doing on the business side is just giving folks more options to acquire that makes sense for the use case. Maybe prepaid subscription is the right one. Maybe postpaid subscription is the right one. But you'll have both of those options. And those metered options are new for RHEL 7 ELS. And honestly, I think they're going to be fairly successful because it allows you to dial in your spend exactly to the usage. Right? You don't have to worry about, I got to pay for a year, but I know I'm only going to need it for 5 months, and then have to kind of work back and forth with your salesperson to figure all that out. Now it's like, can you just send me a bill for what I use? Yeah, that's the cloudy way, right? And that's what we're going to get with RHEL 7 ELS.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So let's talk a little bit about a really common use case is ephemeral systems, where I spin up a RHEL system. Maybe it's only going to be there for an hour or a couple hours or a day, and then I'm going to delete it through an automated process and spin up another one tomorrow, right? Historically, this has been kind of a challenging use case when you're dealing with RHEL subscriptions. But a lot of the work you and the team have done have improved this. So can you talk a little bit about like what's the best way to do this if I have these ephemeral systems in my environment?
Yeah. So the first thing you do, if you haven't done it already, if you haven't remembered anything else, turn on simple content, please, because that's kind of the key here. So that's the first thing we do, right? Let's turn on this subscription model or subscription experience that doesn't require us to have to attach subscriptions, because that was the pain point. The pain point was you had a finite number of subscriptions, and I'm bringing up and tearing down systems very quickly, which means I have to keep reallocating these tickets per se, so that these systems would have access to content. Well, when you turn on simple content, you no longer have to do that. So your workflow works like this. Step 1, turn on simple content. Step 2, register the system, because you're going to have to do that to get the bits. Step 3, install the bits, use the system however you want to. Step 4, turn it off. That's it. Right? And folks are going to be like, well, what do I do about the old system record that's out there? It's up to you. Right? If you want to delete it, great. Keeps my databases clean. I appreciate you. If you choose not to delete it, that's also okay. Okay? Because one of the things that we do on the subscription services side is we don't look at inactive systems when we start calculating how much RHEL are you using, right? We only look at systems that have checked in the last 24 hours anyway, right? So if you're in a scenario where you're like, I can't get my devs to properly unregister their systems because reasons, that's cool, man. It's totally okay, right? Like I said, if you want to clean up your inactive systems, we really appreciate it. We got some API scripts that actually can automate that for you. But at the end of the day, You don't have to uncleanly, or you don't have to cleanly unregister a system. It's more of a do it because you're being a good citizen, but not a compulsory thing in order for you to use the software that you already paid us to use.
I really like this concept of being able to use RHEL subscriptions with ephemeral systems, but even something even more ephemeral that I can think of would be containers. So when I talk to folks about using, say, RHEL UBI containers, the question I invariably get is, do I need to register RHEL containers?
So generally no, right? So one of the things, and we can demo this in a minute, but one of the things you got to remember with a Red Hat container is running on a registered Red Hat platform. And I know that's vague, so I'm going to be a little specific in a minute. But if a Red Hat container is running on a registered Red Hat platform, it will have access to the bits out of the box, period. And when I say a Red Hat platform here, I mean specifically a RHEL system or a Red Hat OpenShift cluster. It could be either. Okay. The workflow is pretty straightforward. You register your RHEL system, right? And this is actually true both in simple content mode and not in simple content mode. So this one is actually predates even some of the simple content stuff. But you register your RHEL system, you run Podman to pull a container. That's it. You have access to the bits. Now, there are plenty of use cases where you may want to not use the out-of-box content and register the container directly. A common example here is lots of folks use container files as a descriptive blueprint. I know that term's overloaded, but a descriptive blueprint for how to construct a container. And as part of that container file, they may want to register that container, install some bits or what have you. That is a supported workflow as well, right? Where we just want to make sure that when you when you stand up a Red Hat container on a Red Hat platform, you will have access to content out of the box. But if you have advanced use cases where you may want to, register it in a special way, or maybe your host is registered to our hosted platform, but maybe you want to use your container to get access from your satellite. There's a lot of crazy things that people do. Those are all supported too. So you can register a container, but under most circumstances, you shouldn't have to.
And we had a question in the chat just asking, like, how does the container know if it's running on one of these RHEL platforms?
Yeah, so there's some integration that we do with Podman and how we handle secrets. And basically what it boils down to is when we spin up the container, we inject in the secrets that container needs in order to access repositories, whether those are satellite repositories or CDN repositories.
And Shantanu, as a follow-up, kind of asks, wasn't containerization meant for isolation and separation?
Yeah, and I think most of that's still true, right? Like you still get those aspects. But at the same time, there are plenty of valid reasons why folks may want to install bits into a container. And it doesn't really break a security boundary to inject those secrets into the container. So it works pretty well. Most people use this all the time, don't even realize that it works because it's just that damn seamless.
So you mentioned this is something you could demo and show us how this works.
Yeah, let's hop into it. So what I have here is I took this RHEL 9 system, just pre-registered before we hopped on because you're already seeing registration. I don't need to show it again. And I installed Podman because I didn't feel like waiting for it. And I'm just going to go ahead and run a RHEL 8 container. Okay, so we're in. And what I'm going to do here, just for the sake of, if I type correctly, I'm just going to do a yum repo list -v just to show you where the repositories are coming from. But as you can see, most of this, it just works. I didn't have to do anything special to get this container, access to its bits. And what you're going to see here is you're going to see two sets of repositories. So I pulled the UBI container, the universal base image, which has access to some public repos that don't even require registration. And then also I'm seeing the CDN repositories for RHEL 8. I just did a yum repo list -v so we can see the actual, URLs. And I think there's like one more that's coming. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so you can see here, we have all our cdn.redhat.com repos, which normally you would have to register a system to get access to. And then, down here, you'll see this CDN UBI repos, which are the publicly available UBI repos, which are available to UBI containers regardless of whether they are running on a registered platform or not. So it just works pretty clean. The key things I wanted to really show here is that I've stood up a RHEL 8 container on top of a RHEL 9 host, and I have correct access to the RHEL 8 bits inside the RHEL 8 container. And that all works seamlessly. So, install Podman, pull some containers, any content that you have access to in your account due to simple content, you can pull that content into your containers and use that content, in whatever use case makes sense for you.
So we had a question asking about, when you check the subscription status, you'll see unknown. Sometimes, like, what is that? Why do we see unknown? What is that telling us?
Yeah. So in the past, subscription status was a thing that was calculated on the per host level based upon what subscription you had attached to the system. So, it would tell you like you had a valid subscription or an expired subscription or an insufficient subscription. When you're in simple content mode, there is no concept of subscription status anymore. And in fact, if you were to run like subscription manager status on a system that is in SCA mode, it'll actually show you system status disabled and system purpose status disabled, because those are no longer concepts when SCA is turned on.
Okay, so if you're in simple content access, you would basically expect to see this unknown status. That means everything's working properly. Is that right?
No, if you're seeing unknown status, you're not in simple content mode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You should see disabled when you're in simple
Okay.
content mode. Though, depending on your version of Subman, there's maybe some older versions where that isn't clear.
Okay.
But yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about subscription watch, right? We have this simple content access, right, that lets us really easily, register systems and stuff. But how do we keep track of all this? How do we know how much, how many RHEL subscriptions we're using, et cetera?
Yeah. So this is where all the tools kind of tie together, right? And this is this is probably like the capstone, right? So instead of us having a world where you attach subscriptions to systems and you track which subscription is attached, instead of that, we have Subscription Watch, which is officially called the subscription service, but we call it Subscription Watch because that was its old name. But it provides you a daily snapshot of your usage of Red Hat products, right? So in the case of RHEL, you drop the variant list. We cover most of the RHEL variants, including satellite, as well as many of the RHEL add-ons. So instead of you looking at what subscriptions are attached to systems, when you register systems, one of the system facts that gets transmitted to Red Hat in that registration is what Red Hat products are installed on that system. And as those products change, that information gets sent to the hybrid cloud console, and this is what Subscription Watch uses. So what I can look at here is I can see my usage of Red Hat products, and I'm going to pick today. I can see I have a subscription threshold. Basically, if you take all your RHEL subs and add them all up, that's how many sockets of RHEL you have. In my case, 94. And then we tally up your usage based upon usage class. So do we see hypervisors, right? Do we see nodes that we know VMs are running on? Because those got to get counted differently, right? RHEL virtual data centers are different subscription than the standard RHEL sub. So we have to count those differently. Is it running on the public cloud, right? Because we have to count those. Is it virtual or physical? So the idea is very simply, I can log into the subscription service or anyone in my organization who has access to it. And this is something that's covered in RBAC, so you can dole out who does or does not have access to it. But I can log in and I can see, oh, well, we have 94 sockets of RHEL. Looks like we got, let me see, how good am I at math? 76, 79 sockets in use. I'm probably pretty good, right? But then I can also dig into that a little bit more, where I can say, you know what? Well, what systems are actually contributing to this chart, and where are they coming from, right? So I can see, various systems in my network. So for instance, I got a hypervisor here that's contributing 16 sockets. I can even expand it, and I can see what systems are running on top of it. And then if I, wanted to get more specific, I can even start getting into filtering, right? So where I can say, show me all the hypervisors, actually not usage type, just show me hypervisor usage, right? Because I know that's a different subscription type at Red Hat. Do I have enough hypervisor subs to cover my hypervisors? Actually, I don't, right? I'm actually 16 sockets short. Maybe I need to pick up the phone and call my Red Hat guy, right? But none of this blocks your usage of the technology, right? If you go above your subscription threshold, right, like we'll show you. And we actually have some notification features that we'll be rolling out this year as well. But the idea is that you have access to the software. Go use the software. We're going to give you as accurate as we can give you reporting as often as we can give it to you. So in the case of RHEL, that's daily. In the case of OpenShift, that's either daily or hourly, depending upon the OpenShift offering. And then in the nearish future, we're going to get the Ansible portfolio into the subscription service as well. So you'd have, the 3 core Red Hat platforms in the subscription service. You can also do cool things here, like filter by SLA. And you notice when I filter it by SLA, a couple of things changed. Not only did the chart change, but the subscription threshold changes, right? Because I only have 80 sockets worth of premium subscriptions. But this is a powerful tool for, the person who needs to go and, buy stuff, because they're like, how much stuff do I need to buy? How has that changed over time? Do I need to buy more or less? They can go and pull that information, directly. They don't have to go harass people who are doing technology stuff. We got a reporting engine built in for them. And as we, expand the subscription service, we're going to give you more ways to drill down into this data. So like be able to drill down by department and not just at the organizational level. And then probably the last thing I would point out about the subscription service is by default, we show the past 30 days, but we actually can go back almost 3 years. And I think we're going to increase this to, 5 years as well. So, when you really start thinking about, for capacity planning purposes over the next 2-3 years, what have you, it's nice being able to understand where you're coming from, because it helps you to understand where you're going.
And of course, all this is tied into the hybrid cloud console, which means that not only are all your subscriptions here, all the filtering that we just saw, but you can also tie this into some of your other operations as well, whether you're doing inventory groups to check on patch levels, or maybe your configurations have drifted. So all this is in one place. Just register your systems with Red Hat Connect, with the RHC utility, and you've got all of this right at your fingertips.
Yeah, and the other thing I do want to point out is that even our on-premise tools integrate with the subscription service, right? So if you're a satellite user, you can use the subscription service. There's actually a plugin in Satellite that allows you to share your inventory with the hybrid cloud console. And we're actually building some features to make that even simpler to use, especially for our disconnected customers. Similarly with OpenShift, right? Your OpenShift clusters, if you're using OpenShift that have telemetry turned on, we know how big that cluster is. And in fact, we show that in the subscription service as well, which is particularly good for OpenShift because clusters expand and shrink a lot. Like just the nature of the platform, they're not necessarily static. So being able to do that kind of tracking is super important.
Yeah, that's super cool. So Rich, can you talk a little about like what you and the rest of the team are working on, like right now, like what's going to be kind of coming in the future in relation to subscriptions?
Yeah, so a couple things. One of which I alluded to earlier, but I think it's important to reiterate, is we're doing a lot of work to improve kind of Red Hat's core tenancy model in our account. One of the areas where our customers have told us, they have difficulties working with our platforms is the fact that managing them is pretty flat, right? They can't do things like, I want to give this department access to this software, but not that department, right? A common one that we work with is North American wholesaler. They're like, hey, I have a group of people who we introduce new technologies in, and they validate that technology, make sure it's good. They build the security standards and build our way of deploying that technology. So when I buy an OpenShift subscription from you guys, I need to give it to those people and those people only, because I don't want any random Joe Blow inside my enterprise deploying OpenShift until we have a good corporate standard on how we should do that. That is not a thing you can easily articulate in the Red Hat tools that we have available today. So my team, in addition with some of our partners on the Red Hat IT side, we're building out that kind of core tenancy thing, right? So you see that a lot, right? I mean, I can think of so many use cases where that's useful. If I am a service provider who's supporting multiple customers, right? Like if I have a contract with both Coca-Cola and Pepsi, I can guarantee you they don't want to log into the console and see somebody else's systems, right? And in order to really cleanly articulate that is very difficult to do, with Red Hat tools. So that's one thing that we're working on is tenancy. I'd probably argue the biggest thing that we're working on. The other things that we're working on is really improving the experience for using Red Hat in the public clouds. All right. One of the things that we also got feedback on is that when folks go to spin up RHEL and public clouds, in many places, it's inconsistent with how RHEL is deployed, traditionally in the data center or, in various virtualized softwares like, VMware, hypervisor, stuff like that. So one of the things that we're working on is we're kind of like standardizing some of the experience of deploying RHEL in the public clouds and making it easy that when you do in fact deploy RHEL in the public clouds, if you want to go take advantage of and connect to the hybrid cloud console, you can do that super easy, right? Like I'd mentioned in the last RHEL Presents call, but I think it's worth quoting myself from the past. One of the things that I said is that it should take no more than one command to register a RHEL system. In the public cloud, in many cases, you don't even have to do that, right? You can actually connect up your cloud account at the account level. Say, hey, I own this Amazon account. So when I stand up RHEL, just automatically connect it to the hybrid cloud console. You can do that as well if that's a pattern that you want to use. So those are kind of like our two big things. And then the third thing I'd probably talk about is, we are putting a lot of effort this year and in every year, honestly, and improving the subscription experience for our disconnected customers, because there is a significant number of Red Hat customers who either will not or cannot connect their systems to our hosted platforms. And we don't want to disenfranchise them, to the extent possible, right? Like there's some things we just literally can't ship. And that's fair, but we want to keep that list, small as possible and at least deliver them experiences that even if they're not the same, they're as close as possible. So that's another area where, our team does a lot of work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we have our big yearly conference, Red Hat Summit, coming up next month here in Denver. Rich, are you going to be out there? And if so, giving any talks or anything?
Yes, I'll be joining my pal Terry Bowling. We'll be covering Image Builder as part of our summit session. So if you're in the summit session catalog, look me up. I'll be presenting, I think, on Thursday, like the last day of summit. I don't get to choose those things, but yes, I'll be at summit presenting that presentation. I'll be hanging around in the RHEL booth, doing customer talks, customer meetings and stuff like that. So if you're coming to summit, come see me. I stand out in crowds, so just walk up. I don't bite usually.
As I recall, you usually ask for permission first.
Yes, always. Consent is important. Yes.
Well, awesome, Rich. Thank you very much. And Brian, thank you for kind of carrying the episode as Kansas City's temperatures dropped another 20 degrees in the last 2 days, and it's kind of caught up to me today. So thanks for helping me out here, Brian. Usually try and share the load, but I give you full credit for this episode. But that said, make sure you like this episode, share it with a friend. Rich covered a lot of back to basics type content, a lot of a lot of tools and ideas that are coming or have arrived. Subscriptions don't have to be hard. I know that's shocking, but it really doesn't. Unfortunately, my PhD in RHEL subscriptions is completely useless at this point because I switched on Simple Content Access about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. I don't know.
I
been a
will
while.
let you trade in that PhD for one Scutane clan patch. How about that?
Done. Deal.
All right.
We could do that at Summit.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
So make sure you register for Summit. Like Brian said, that's coming up here in just about a month and a couple of days, which makes me realize that my workload is sitting off to the side here on a different monitor. It's got to get done. But meantime, we've got a lot more content here on the RHEL YouTube channel coming up on Friday. Nate and Scott are back at it again. We'll be covering a crowd-requested topic, and we've entitled this episode, Don't Disable SE Linux. There's already a conversation going on Reddit, so go ahead and go out to the Red Hat subreddit. And in 2 weeks, I think Brian and Nate will be spearheading a conversation on containers, some of the features that came out in the last release, some features that are coming, maybe a sneak peek at some things at Summit. You never know. But yeah, definitely stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you hit that bell so you get notified anytime we go live. I know that for myself, we're focusing a whole lot more this year on video content. That includes live stream content. So definitely keep in touch with us. And in fact, we had a poll recently, Brian, on our channel, and folks have spoken. And the top 2 choices were engaging with us on Discord and Reddit. So we're trying to increase our presence there. And Rich, you joked that our last episode was just over 52 minutes, and looks like we're going to tie that again, because that brings us to the end of this episode. So on behalf of Rich Dorito, our guest for episode 75, really appreciate you coming and talking subscriptions, and I really appreciate your ability to take a somewhat painful subject and shed a very enthusiastic light on it. I find myself getting excited about Simple Content Access and subscribing for repositories, so thank you for that. And then on behalf of Brian Smith, myself, Eric the IT guy, and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you on Friday for Into the Terminal, or in 2 weeks for Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.